The system had messed up the target, but he was a stubborn one, insisting that I should just go with the flow. Are you serious? You're asking me, a guy, to seduce the male lead? The system responded in its usual deadpan tone. It's just a task, who hasn't made a blunder? Just follow the procedure, he won't actually sleep with you. That night, I was draped in a sheer shirt, wearing a chain around my chest, crawling into the male lead's bed. The moment he saw me, his ferocious expression shifted into sudden delight, and he lunged at me like a dog after a bone. System you traitor. Welcome to He History. Subscribe to follow all our latest adventures. Story begins. The system had tricked me, sending me into the novel a year too early. The heroine was still miles away, studying in her senior year of high school. Meanwhile, the male lead, Zebulon Gosling, was the quintessential campus bully. Fighting, skipping classes, it was all part of his daily routine. The system, this unloved spawn, had been pestering me to put on SpongeBob for him. Little did I know, it led me straight into trouble. On my way home from evening study hall, Zebulon dragged me into an alley along with my phone. Without thinking, I threw a punch. Zebulon swiftly blocked it with his arm, clearly startled. I glimpsed at him turning on my phone, the screen's light illuminating his face as he casually dialed 911. Expressionless, he said to me, saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. I'm calling the cops. He didn't look fazed at all. When the call connected, his voice was calm and composed, like a responsible bystander. You guys are fighting, right? I'm reporting it. I stood there, dumbfounded. You're calling the cops on a fight? Zebulon gave me a look, as if I'd just asked the dumbest question on earth. If I can't win, what, should I just wait to get beaten up? He handed me his phone, then reached into his school uniform pocket and pulled out several red bills, shoving them toward me. I glanced at them, at least 5 bills. I didn't take them, but Zebulon, preparing to jump back into the brawl, turned and gave me a once-over, his narrow eyes narrowing further. Not enough, he asked, digging into his other pocket. After a few moments, he pulled out a few more bills and tossed them at me. Then, with swift precision, he vaulted over a pile of boxes and dove back into the fight. The sounds of the scuffle grew louder. I stood there for a moment, stunned, and then bent down to count the money. 900. Among the bills was a crumpled math test sheet, looking like it had been through multiple rounds of stress. No wonder people lined up to be his lackeys. This gig paid better than my day job. Still, being the male lead's lackey wasn't exactly a walk in the park. The next thing I knew, the police had cuffed me along with the others. After giving my statement, I stepped outside to find the night sky pitch black. As I left, I overheard someone behind me grumbling, "Damn it, if I find out who called the cops? No honor among thieves, that scumbag." Instinctively, I glanced back at Zebulon Gosling. It was too dark to make out much beyond the shadowy figures under the distant street lamp. Suddenly, footsteps stopped behind me. "Never seen you before. Was it you who called the cops?" It was the same guy who had been swearing earlier. I noticed Zebulon's gaze fixed on me, making me recall a meme I'd seen. "I'll be watching you, always." He really was the most low-profile campus bully I'd ever encountered, not that I'd met many. I said nothing, but the guy, growing impatient, started stomping toward me. The street lamp's light hit his face, revealing a particularly ruthless look. Pure jailhouse tough. Zebulon took 2 steps forward, brushing past him nonchalantly as he muttered, "I'd like to know who the idiot was that called the cops and messed up our plans. We should have settled things tonight." His words caught me just as I stepped into the street lamp's glow. Unfazed, he continued cursing, even as he stared directly at me. In that instant, Zebulon's gaze shifted. His eyes darkened as he swallowed, almost like he was holding something back. Quietly, he added, "He doesn't seem like that kind of person." The thug sized me up, pausing his approach. "Yeah, doesn't look like it." Before he could finish speaking, Zebulon had closed the distance between us to just a meter. His expression, though casual, carried something strange in it. Especially that gaze. It looked hungry. But the system had assured me, "Don't worry, nothing's wrong. Save your panic for later." I hated myself for not asking more questions. By the time I realized what was really going on, it was too late. Zebulon closed the gap in 2 strides, coming to stand beside me, his voice casual as he asked, "So, you're a student at Elite Academy too? How come I've never seen you before?" His eyes lingered on my face, particularly on a small mole near my eye. His stare unnerved me, but I couldn't pinpoint why. I rubbed at the mole absent-mindedly. "What? You've memorized every student's file. I should have been home ages ago, but you had to drag me into your midnight brawls and steal my phone. Now you're interrogating me like a madman." Zebulon's eyes darkened again, his expression not shifting an inch as his gaze dropped to my lips. I frowned. "What are you looking at?" This was starting to feel off, really off. I asked the system, "Is your male lead mentally unstable?" The system responded confidently, "His data is fine, he's just a bit odd." But that's the best it could tell me? Zebulon's gaze didn't waver as he continued, "You must be new here. If you've been at Elite Academy all this time, there's no way I wouldn't have noticed." There was a strange urgency in his voice. I glanced at him, feeling puzzled. The system chimed in. "He finds you too attractive and feels threatened." Wait, but the heroine hasn't even shown up yet. He's already worried I'll steal her? Isn't that a bit premature? The system fell silent. Zebulon, however, wasn't about to give up. "So, when did you transfer in?" Even for $900, my patience had its limits. "God, are you still going on about that? Will you pay me if I answer your questions?" His eyes lit up like he'd found a gold mine. "Yes, 1,000 for each answer." What? I couldn't keep a straight face anymore. At the mention of money, I couldn't help but laugh. "Well then, young master, ask away. I promise to answer every question. I'm a student at Elite Academy, transferred last month." Zebulon nodded decisively. 2,000. "What's your name? Which class? What's your favorite food? Any allergies? What are your hobbies? What kind of people do you like?" So many questions. I grinned, sensing an opportunity. "You know, standing around like this is exhausting. Why don't we find somewhere to sit and talk? At this rate, I could pay for my college tuition." The system had set me up as an orphan with no parents when it sent me into the novel. To be fair, that was true in real life too. But I still couldn't wrap my head around this plot, balancing school, earning money for college, and seducing the heroine. What kind of twisted imagination had the author used to create this story? Not that it mattered. What mattered was that Zebulon, this overly generous fool, had agreed without hesitation. "Why don't we go to my place? I'll get you the money." He emphasized the words, "get you the money," his lips curling into a satisfied smile. Something about this felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Still, I was a grown man. What could he do to me? So I agreed. "Sure, let's go." Zebulon's mood seemed to lift even more. "Come in, I'll get you the money." This was what Zebulon said as he ushered me into his house. I didn't need to be told twice. I quickly swapped my shoes and followed him in. "Come to my room, I'll get you the money." Waiting outside wouldn't be right. He was surprisingly polite. I followed him into his room, and he pointed to the large bed. "Sit there. I don't have any chairs in my room. I'll grab the money." He seemed oddly cheerful as he said this. Weird. A villa this big, decorated so lavishly, and there wasn't a single chair in the room? The system piped up. "This is the nth time today you've said things feel off." What exactly feels off? I thought for a moment. He's like a pervert. "You're talking about me?" I jumped, startled. I hadn't realized I'd said that out loud. Zebulon was leaning against the doorframe, holding a leather belt in his hand, looking at me with an amused smirk. His long, pale fingers gently stroked the belt, his smile faint but unmistakable. "Did I do something wrong to make you uncomfortable? Or is there some misunderstanding?" Internally, I weighed my options. Usually, when a boss asked questions like this, it meant they were about to fire you. "You misheard me," I replied quickly. Zebulon raised an eyebrow but didn't say whether he believed me or not. "All right then. Now, answer my questions." He strode over and sat beside me, his presence filling the space between us. "What's your name?" At the thought of earning 1,000 for each answer, I didn't hesitate. "Peter Boyd." The more he questioned, the more convinced I became that something was off with Zebulon Gosling. I could understand his curiosity about what kind of people I liked. It made sense since I was supposed to be his future rival in love, and the system had already told me he felt threatened by me. But why in the world was he interested in the color of my socks? System, tell me the truth. Is the male lead not all there in the head? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. The system responded in its typical nonchalant tone. Just answer him. At least he's not asking about the color of your underwear. And let's be honest, if he were normal, why would he pay you $1,000 per question? Fair point. Money comes first, after all. In the spirit of full transparency, I lifted the hem of my pants and showed him. Look, white socks. Zebulon's expression darkened. He frowned. You shouldn't just show people so casually. Is he mentally challenged or something? He asked, didn't he? But since I was thinking about the cash, I just held back my retort and nodded absent-mindedly. Zebulon stared at my socks for a while, then muttered under his breath, they look a bit tight. Let me help you. I glanced down. He wasn't wrong. They were leaving marks on my skin. How are you going to help? I asked, curious. Zebulon reached out, and his warm fingertips brushed against my calf. I instinctively tried to pull away, but his grip tightened suddenly, pressing deep indentations into my skin. Don't move, he said in a hoarse voice. Zebulon gently tugged at the edge of my socks, pulling them outward to loosen the grip on my skin. His movements were delicate, almost tender, but his hands were so warm that it tickled. I almost flinched, but before I could, Zebulon withdrew his hands. The veins on the back of his hands stood out sharply, betraying the tension he was holding back. I heard his breath hitch for a moment before he murmured, your legs are so pale and soft. It's like they'd turn red if I squeezed a little harder. Red from the blood, maybe. Thanks. You too, I replied sarcastically, forcing a smile. Zebulon seemed to be lost in thought, still staring at the spot where I'd lowered my pant leg. He mumbled again, my muscles are hard. Does that bother you? He was even more confusing than the eccentric bosses I'd had at work. Unable to decipher his meaning, I responded earnestly, hard muscles are good, means you're strong. Before Zebulon could reply, the system cut in with a cold warning. Sometimes, keeping your mouth shut is the best strategy. Zebulon nodded thoughtfully, then rolled up his sleeves in a casual gesture. The defined muscles along his arms revealed that he clearly worked out. I've heard you're good at fighting. So how come you couldn't win this time? And why'd you borrow my phone halfway through? Oh, so now he's flexing his muscles to show off how much tougher he is than me? I could be just as snarky. Guess you weren't strong enough, huh? Zebulon fell silent for a moment before offering an explanation. It depends on how many people I'm up against. Sometimes it's smarter to retreat. He brought a whole crew. I only had 2 friends with me. Then, halfway through the fight, 3 more of his buddies showed up. Of course, I called the cops. But I wasn't about to use my own phone. Random bystanders are the best cover. He paused and added quietly, I'm lucky you were there. Zebulon's tone shifted, becoming firmer. They might come after you for a while. Stick close to me, so they don't mess with you. I was caught off guard by his protective tone. For a moment, I thought, maybe the male lead wasn't so bad after all. The system abruptly interjected. Oh, he can get even better. Confused, I asked, what do you mean by that? The system let out 2 mechanical chuckles and then fell silent, leaving me hanging in confusion. When I looked up, Zebulon was gazing at me with an intense expression, his eyes unreadable. I wasn't sure how long he'd been staring at me like that. I raised an eyebrow, urging him to speak. Zebulon suddenly leaned in closer, his breath warm against my skin. Your waist? It looks so small. Can I measure it? His fingers twitched with anticipation, and there was a startling hunger in his eyes. I glanced at his waist, noticing the solid lines of muscle. Oh great, here we go, more flexing about how he works out every day. Sure, hurry up, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. But Zebulon didn't move. Instead, he just kept looking at me with a strange, almost pitiable expression, like he was waiting for permission. Go on, I urged, softening my tone slightly. With a flick of his wrist, Zebulon straightened his belt, then leaned in to wrap it around my waist. He pulled it tight, buckling it carefully around me. It only goes this far. You're really thin, he commented, pointing to the notch on the belt. I glanced down to humor him, but suddenly Zebulon pulled sharply on the belt, and I tumbled forward, straight into his chest. His solid, muscular chest. Damn, this guy was built like a tank. Zebulon laughed softly, his voice almost teasing. I really want to. The end of his sentence trailed off, leaving his intentions ambiguous. What? Zebulon gave me an innocent look. Sorry, my hand slipped. Let me loosen it for you. As he slowly unbuckled the belt, he added casually, I'll transfer the money for the questions you answered. I didn't care how long it took him to undo the belt, money was all that mattered. I quickly pulled up the payment app's QR code, eager for the transfer. Zebulon glanced at the screen and said offhandedly, add me as a friend. Once we'd added each other, he transferred the full amount. I couldn't help but look at him with newfound respect, like he was a personal aim. At least now, I wouldn't have to worry about college tuition for 2 years. But Zebulon turned his head away, his voice cooling. Don't look at me like that. Huh. He hesitated for a moment, then sighed as if unable to hold back anymore. Folding the belt in his hands twice, he lightly tapped my face with it. His eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite place. Desire, maybe? Keep this for later. Later? What, so he could smack me with it? No way was I letting him hit me without extra pay. System, he's threatening me with a belt. Does the supporting character have no dignity? He better pay me more for this. The system's mechanical voice responded coldly. You'll understand later. It might even feel nice. What? That didn't sound right. Was that even English? After that, I kept running into Zebulon every day. The system said it was some law of supporting characters, something about inevitable encounters between the leads and supporting cast, which triggered more story progression. Even though the main plot hadn't officially started yet, because I'd already had contact with the male lead, I kept getting tangled up with him. Which, to be honest, wasn't a bad thing. More contact meant more chances to make money. And with Zebulon as my boss, one who paid well and didn't ask for much, I was more than willing to play along. Our relationship progressed rapidly. Not only did he buy me food every day, but he also insisted on giving me rides to school, sparing me the 5-kilometer walk. But one night, after an exhausting day, I woke up in a start to find Zebulon lying next to me, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. His voice was a low murmur in the dark. Why do you trust me so much? What makes you think I'm a good person? He kept asking, as if trying to convince himself of something. I reached out and patted his back absent-mindedly. His body stiffened immediately, as if I'd uncovered some hidden vulnerability. He froze, even holding his breath. You are, I reassured him. Now go to sleep. As soon as I said that, I felt a wave of warmth wash over me from his direction. I want to hold you, Zebulon whispered. Half asleep, I reached for his hand, and he immediately wrapped himself around me, practically molding his body to mine like an octopus. Baby, he muttered, rubbing his cheek against mine. Too tired to think, I let the system do the worrying for me. What does he mean? I asked. The system responded indifferently. Kiss him and you'll find out. I wasn't in the mood for more riddles, so I ignored the system and drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up in a mess of limbs. Zebulon and I were tangled together in an uncomfortable position. My left leg was thrown over his body while my right was pinned beneath him. His hands rested on my waist, ready to pull me closer at any moment. I pushed him off as soon as I stirred. The movement woke Zebulon, and he blinked at me in confusion. You're up early, he remarked, glancing at the time. Usually, you sleep until 7:30. Yeah, well, you're crushing my leg. How did we end up like this? Zebulon lowered his eyes. I'll be more careful next time. Okay. I got up to change my clothes, and suddenly the system broke its long silence. Host, don't you think something feels off? What do you mean? I asked while quickly changing out of my pajamas. Zebulon, still seated on the bed, watched me with an intensity that made me feel his gaze like a tangible weight. When I paused for a second, he stood and approached me, casually tugging my shirt down into place. Sit down. I'll help you dress, he offered. Before I could protest, Zebulon had already pushed me back onto the bed, grabbing my leg with practiced ease as he slipped my socks and shoes on. Once we were ready, Zebulon and I left for school together. In the car, he leaned against me, trying to catch a bit of extra sleep. His hand rested on mine, absent-mindedly toying with my fingers, as usual. But today, he seemed different, like he had something on his mind. "What do you want to say?" I finally asked. Zebulon hesitated before looking at me, an unusual vulnerability in his eyes. "If I get into trouble, you'll help me, right?" I silently apologized in my heart. Zebulon Gosling was a good friend, but I still had to go after the heroine. "Of course I will," I answered, trying to keep things light. Zebulon's lips curved into a sincere smile. "Actually, I haven't been sleeping well lately. But last night when I held you, I slept like a baby. Can we try that again?" It seemed all protagonists had their odd quirks. I hesitated for a moment, and Zebulon's expression dimmed. I guess I was wrong. I thought, given our relationship, I could ask for your help. With the conversation taking this turn, I had no choice but to nod. Zebulon immediately lifted his head, slightly tilted his chin, and motioned toward his lap. He explained, "It's more comfortable this way. Hurry up, we'll be at school soon." Over the past few weeks, Zebulon had been attending my classes with me. I figured it was only a matter of time before he'd start working hard to prepare for college, where he'd eventually meet the heroine. For now, I might as well help him lay a solid foundation. Reluctantly, I gritted my teeth and shifted onto his lap. Zebulon leaned down and wrapped his arms around me. The usually smooth ride suddenly grew bumpy, and I instinctively grabbed onto him for balance. He chuckled softly, a mischievous glint in his eyes, as if he had planned this all along. Before I could react, he rested his head on my shoulder, his hot breath brushing against my ear. A shiver ran through me, making me stiffen. "This isn't comfortable," I muttered, propping myself up on his thigh to get off. But Zebulon suddenly bounced his leg, and I fell back into his arms due to the momentum. "I said I'm not comfortable," I repeated, more insistent this time. Summer clothes were thin, and I could feel the heat radiating off his body. Zebulon didn't respond. He tightened his grip around my waist, pulling me deeper into his embrace. My struggle ceased abruptly as a tingling sensation surged up my spine. Zebulon bit my ear, a light nip, like a playful punishment, before releasing me. His breath was warm against my skin as he whispered, "Stop squirming. It's early and I might lose control." I couldn't help but notice something I really shouldn't have. My body stiffened, and I sat rigidly in his lap, trying not to move. Zebulon glanced at me but didn't say anything. Even if I was slow on the uptake, I couldn't ignore how strange things were becoming. As soon as the car stopped, I bolted, practically flying out of there. I hurriedly called out to the system, "Your male lead isn't acting right." How could he react like that to his best friend? The system remained disturbingly calm. "He told you it's hard to control himself in the morning. Besides, he was ready to hit you with a belt earlier. Do you think he's harboring some other kind of feelings? It's just a biological reaction, totally normal." After firing off its usual string of questions, the system finished with a dismissive, "You're overthinking it." Maybe it was right. Still, I decided to keep my distance from Zebulon for a while. Something about this whole situation was giving me the creeps. Luckily, we weren't in the same class, so I had the perfect excuse to slip away by claiming I had homework to finish. Zebulon didn't chase after me, but things that used to seem normal were starting to feel off. My seat was by the window, and Zebulon always liked to hang around after class to chat with me. Even when I went to the bathroom, he'd follow. When the bell rang, I immediately slumped over my desk, pretending to be asleep. I soon felt that familiar gaze on me. Peeking through barely open eyes, I saw a shadow fall over my desk. I didn't need to look any closer, it was Zebulon. He stood beside me without moving, his presence looming until the next bell rang and he finally walked away. This went on all morning. By the last class, my desk mate leaned in, curious. "Did you two have a fight?" Taking advantage of the teacher's distraction as they wrote on the board, I whispered back, "No, I'm just tired." "But he called your name earlier. I saw your fingers twitch, but you didn't respond." I think Zebulon noticed too, my desk mate continued. He didn't look happy, his face was like thunder. My hand faltered mid-note. Zebulon had been treating me so well lately that I'd almost forgotten he had a notoriously bad temper. I sighed internally and asked the system when the heroine would finally appear. The system buzzed for a few moments before responding. Not sure. I'm only responsible for your tasks. But my colleague mentioned that the main characters meet after graduation. I counted the days, it wasn't far off now. I decided to put some distance between me and Zebulon for the time being. But during lunch, I couldn't avoid running into him. As usual, he was waiting at the door to walk me home for a meal. I mulled over my words for a long time before finally speaking. Zebulon, I really appreciate everything you've done for me, but I think it's time for me to head back to my own place. It's been a lot of trouble for you, and I could use the exercise. Zebulon's expression didn't change, but his silence grew heavier. When he didn't respond for a long time, I felt compelled to explain further. It's nothing personal really. I'm grateful for all your help. But staying at your place all the time isn't sustainable. It's spoiling me and I'll have a hard time adjusting later. Despite my best efforts, my reasoning didn't seem to convince him. Zebulon took a long pause before finally speaking. Why not? You can stay with me forever. Wherever I go, I'll take you with me. You can spend my money, and I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. My heart sank as I realized that my worst fear was coming true. What are you saying? Zebulon took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he tried to keep his emotions in check. I'm saying I need you. Without you, I can't sleep. In return, I'll share everything I have with you. You're my best friend. No one's ever treated me sincerely but you. I could feel my guilt bubbling up. All I really cared about was his money. Aren't we best friends? Zebulon's voice remained gentle, but his expression was off, as if something darker was brewing underneath. His face was void of any warmth, and his eyes, normally calm, were shadowed with a deep intensity, almost twisted by the emotions he was desperately trying to hide. I instinctively took a step back. Zebulon clenched his fists tightly, bracing himself against the doorframe for support. Peter, come home with me. Let's go eat, okay? His entire body was trembling as he struggled to control himself. The system, which had been quiet for most of the day, suddenly urged me. Go with him. You don't want to see what happens if you don't. But the system cut me off, as if already knowing what I was going to ask. No, he won't hurt you. Reluctantly, I took a cautious step toward Zebulon. Are you okay? He bit his lip and nodded slowly, still asking, will you come home with me? I sighed. All right. As soon as I agreed, Zebulon pulled me into a tight embrace. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then, in a voice so soft I almost didn't hear it, he whispered, I thought you didn't want me anymore. A single tear fell onto my collarbone, warm and wet. It was Zebulon's tear, and the sensation made me shudder slightly. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye and asked, do you think I'm pathetic? If you come home with me, I won't be pathetic anymore. The system chimed in. See? He just really needs affection. He doesn't want to lose his best friend. I patted Zebulon's back awkwardly. Come on, don't cry. I really do consider you my friend. As long as you don't get too clingy, I'll go home with you. Looking back on this moment years later, I realized that tear, which had left me so bewildered, was just another part of his plan. He knew exactly how to play the role of the abandoned puppy, tugging at my heartstrings. Once pity turned into care, love wasn't far behind. After that day, Zebulon became even clingier.